Hey, Raynard, did you want to talk about Didi?
Oh yeah, sure. I really enjoyed that one.
Raynard, you okay there?
Sorry, I just thinking about that movie made me remember about 50 cringy things that I did in high school. Just give me a minute. Do you have a paper bag I can breathe into or something?
Hey, everybody, welcome back to A Goat and a Fox Talk About Movies. I'm Daniel,
I'm Raynard.
and I actually don't remember how long. I think it's been a few weeks since it did it last. Things have been a little crazy on my end. I know I told you about it, Raynard. You all might have heard about it. There was a big strike where I work. And we literally just tonight, just about like an hour before we started recording here, we just ratified that contract. So we're officially off strike 31 minutes from now.
Oh, that's good. Get that resolved.
Yeah, so it's been good. We got some good wins and everything. It's a good contract, so I'm happy for that. But that's also meant my schedule has been a little hectic over the past few weeks.
I just go back into my box when I'm done.
Yeah. Little box, fox box right there. But anyway, so wanted to kind of come back because it's been a little while. I want to talk about something, and I just saw last night this beautiful film called Didi, and I really loved it. I know you saw it a couple weeks ago, Raynard, and you really liked it. So I was like, hey, what better thing to talk about than this?
Yeah, it's just it's a very simple movie, but it's just so well realized, and I wouldn't say that I enjoy the entire thing because parts of it make me want to die, but it's really just feels, I think, authentic as not like, I feel like it's overused in discussion of movies, but I think it's really applicable here.
Yeah, it's like it's basically it's Lady Bird for us for us guys who were in middle school around 2008.
Yeah, there really are kind of parallels. It's very much like, they're both stories about these kind of like misfits that live in like a non-glamorous part of California. In a weird way, it's almost like this is like the Italian neorealism to Greta Gerwig's like New Hollywood, if that's like, Easy Rider, which kind of very like this rebellious film, whereas like this is more like a Bicycle Thieves, where it kind of feels a little bit more like verite and all these kind of non-professional actors and this very sort of like, heady mix of emotion you're dealing with, but depicted very kind of frankly.
I'll take your word on a lot of that. So. He was a YouTuber, and I'm a YouTuber, so I connected.
So it's the early mid-aughts web design of this movie like brought me back so hard.
It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times.
Mostly that.
Yeah, so this movie was directed, written by Sean Wang, and I imagine this must be. I think that this has to be autobiographical, or it might not.
It's gotta be. I mean, I think this is his debut feature. He did a short from like a couple years ago called 99 Waipo. That's like a doc about his two grandmothers at home, and it feels very much of a part with this. That one's kind of more simple, like just them being fun, adorable grandmas and stuff, but it feels kind of the same, stew as cooking or whatever, so it must be.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is that because I always kind of try to look up like little tidbits and everything to know about, And the title of this, Dìdi, is Chinese for younger brother. So movie is younger brother. And I don't know, that just... I feel like I should have had a point with that. But it's just like, you know, it's... I don't know, like one more thing that I have to kind of like keep in mind as I try to go through a movie. It's like, what do you want to focus on? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and that is
just focuses on the little brother character. But I thought this would be more insightful to bring up. I'm so sorry.
Well, it is interesting just because, like, even though we are focusing on Chris, he's kind of our like entry point into the movie. It's interesting that the title kind of externalized, like he's got an older sister, Vivian, I think is her name, and so that kind of title sort of takes it out of him and kind of like sidelines him in his own movie almost, even from the outset. But we're very much in his mindset.
Well, I guess what is kind of interesting, it does kind of mix in with one of his main arcs through the movie where, you know, when you are a preteen going into being a teenager, that's kind of the part of your life where you can you have to stop being selfish. Because when you're a kid, you're selfish. Because you don't know any better, you know? You're just like, you know, you're a baby and you go, I'm hungry, I'm tired, you know?
Yeah.
But there's a certain point where you have to start realizing, oh, other people have feelings, other people are people in themselves, and you have to start realizing, oh, I have to play by their rules too. I have to make sure that they have things that they need. And that's something that Chris, the main character here, has to learn through the movie. And he has to learn it at a time when, at the advent of social media, where when you mess up, it's immortalized forever.
High stakes. I feel like in today's like hellscape of like Twitter and everything, like we like long for the days when like MySpace was it, and this is very much a reminder that no, social media's always been hellish, just different ways.
Yeah. But you could personalize your page back then, and that made the difference. You used to be able to make your own YouTube channel, like background and everything. It was so cool, and now it's all the same.
It's all the same. Ring that bell.
But it is an interesting, because that era because obviously the internet had existed for a while by then, but those aughts, that decade, was when the internet went from being like a curiosity to something that you would start to invest significant time into. You know, it's like, again, Chris, he makes videos. He makes these stupid videos with his friends where he blows up his neighbor's mailbox. So he'll be like, oh, he took a random video of his grandma in the backyard talking about stuff. And he just throw it online, and that's what it was. People were just uploading their own stuff. You didn't have channel strategies.
Right. You weren't optimizing the analytics or whatever.
But that was also... Nowadays, like, people have a better idea of, like, rules for social media, where it's like, oh, you don't put stuff on there you don't want to know about, that kind of thing. And we didn't really know that in 2008. And so it was this weird point in time where this new public forum was something that we didn't know how to interface with yet. And so it was a time when it was easier to be hurt by somebody not having you in their top friends anymore, or somebody blocking you. You can't really block someone in real life.
Right.
You know, it's like those were new things that we were still getting used to.
Yeah, and this is kind of this way that, like, these kids who are, like you're saying, like, starting to maybe learn that they can't be just purely self-serving, but also just kind of how are they defining themselves? How are they interacting with other friends? Do they like their friends? and then you have this other forum for it where you have a different kind of control as compared to your day-to-day interactions. And so how we're, seeing that from these two different angles is interesting.
Because again, that point of time in your life is already confusing enough, because you have to, to quote scripture half correctly here, put aside childish things and find something else, but you don't really know what that other thing is yet.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the things you put aside, maybe you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's kind of a question of like, what do you earnestly need to put down and stop doing, and what are you doing just out of peer pressure that maybe you're going to regret stepping away from?
Right.
And those are the choices that Chris is confronted with, and sometimes he doesn't make those choices correctly.
Yeah, I really like the Chris character is so interesting because, as we kind of follow him through these sort of like last week or whatever of summer before high school, he really like, you're pulling for him, you're rooting for him, but he's also a little shit at times, and like he does things that are unacceptable, and you're kind of left to sit with that, That's kind of another way that this sort of, like, if we are talking Lady Bird, it kind of diverges a little bit from that, because there's a bit, they all have arcs, of course, it's like, it's a narrative, but like this one is a little bit more like, leaves the door open to like, you don't know how it's all going to turn out, and he doesn't either, but that's just kind of how life goes.
Yeah, because I think one big contrast to point out with Lady Bird is that with Lady Bird, it was kind of like the mom was a character as well as Lady Bird was. And like she had her own kind of path to follow there. Whereas in this one, Chris's mother is already like, she's a more static character, because she's like, she's trying her best in a difficult situation. Her husband is on the other side of the ocean, working, sending money home, and so she's kind of under pressure from the neighbors, from other families. It's kind of like the stereotypical Asian mom. Well, my son does extracurriculars and gets a 4.0 GPA, and she's like, well, Chris makes videos, he skates.
Yeah.
Like, so she's under that pressure there. And the movie does a good job of showing that to us, and showing how Chris is kind of tuned out of that. Like, he can't see the hard time his mom is having, and he gets like a few glimpses of it, and he's like, oh, things are kind of bad, but he just kind of pushes that aside.
Yeah, it's not as flashy, but I think it's really, there's a lot of internality to both her and the older sister.
In the beginning of the movie, like they kind of like, they're snipping at each other like you would kind of expect from sibling rivalry. It's like, she bursts into his room, be like, what did you do? And then he goes and he pees on her lotion bottle. But there's one point where like he's had kind of like a really rough night. She starts like kind of prodding at him again, and he like legitimately snaps at her. And you can kind of tell like she's kind of shaken by that, and knowing that she's about to leave for college soon, you see that she kind of changes the way she interacts with him after that point.
Yeah, like you can really sense Vivian's like anxiety about she's going off to UCSD or whatnot, and you can really tell that she's stressed about that, and this is a big change for her, and this is probably the first time she's been away from home for a significant period of time, I would assume. And but again, the way that she's kind of dealing with that, she's pushing at him and stuff, but then she really does kind of come around and kind of like offer an olive branch to him, and she like drives him around to meet his friends and stuff like that later on as she gets in. So that's kind of her way to sort of like try to make things right, which is, even at the end of the film, when we eventually get to that point, like not something where emotionally or mentally that Chris is still at. So it's kind of interesting to see someone a little ways down the road still kind of figuring stuff out, but like she does have a certain level of maturity that he doesn't.
Right, you know, like she's at that point where, again, like you said, you know, she has this new thing she's gonna have to deal with, but she takes him under her wing for at least like the last little bit of summer. It's like there's a part where he goes to that party with his new friends, and he has a real bad trip.
Reefer madness.
It's really funny. Do you mind me like mildly spoiling Between the Temples?
Sure.
So that movie also has a drug trip in it. And so I had like a double feature yesterday, and I watched both movies, and I thought, okay, Between the Temples could be like this nice, down to earth drama about a cantor, you know, helping his old teacher, you know, being the teacher for her, have her first bar mitzvah. And another trailer still is a comedy, but is even kind of wackier than I expected from the trailers. And they have like a really big drug trip sequence in that. And I was like, okay, here's Didi. This will be a nice little drama. And then this also has a drug trip. So there's just,
you know, you can't get away from him. You're gonna have to watch The Big Lebowski next or something.
if I had a nickel for every unexpected drug trip in a drama movie I saw yesterday, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot. But it's weird that it happened twice.
Yeah, it's definitely like you know, I was talking about the kind of verite style or whatever. Like, there are a couple of like wild swings that he makes with that. Like apparently I was watching the credits afterwards. Spike Jonze, the filmmaker who they mentioned at one point in the movie, voiced the dead squirrel.
Yeah. This is like it's like, why did you blow me up? Why did you kill me? That wasn't his voice. But it's like it's a very funny sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like there's something to this movie, like, because even, you know, outside of that, there's something to this movie that felt very very gripping still.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or it's like another funny thing. So, big part of this movie is that Chris, you know, he has his 2 friends that he hangs out with, but you can kind of tell even early on in the movie, like in the status quo, that he's kind of a third wheel in that friend group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he kind of follows along behind. Like the moment that they meet up, they start talking, and he just walks behind. He's kind of like he's not really comfortable where he is.
Yeah.
And he comes across a group of older boys, and they're like, "Oh, dude, you film skateboarding stuff? That's awesome! Come on, let's do it." And so he starts hanging out with them more and less with his old friends.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part where he's filming them skating. Security guard comes out, and they all run. And the way like that was filmed there, like, also was just very striking. That use of the slow mo, where just sort of like, oh, he's actually kind of like being part of the group and everything.
Yeah.
He's getting in trouble, but it feels good doing it.
Right. Yeah, it's like a pretty, like, it's not really a plotty film. Like, there's like him and his relationship with his friends. There's his relationship with the kind of the older guys, and his like burgeoning interest in like making skating videos and like improving on that. There's his the girl that he's kind of crushing on, and then his relationship with his family. But like, it's kind of just like this like soup that you're sort of just like bathing in and kind of just experiencing how these things are just kind of intersecting or whatnot. Yeah, I don't know where it's going with that.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's like our discussion here. We're just kind of swirling around, just like, oh, this part. Let's talk about this part. But that's kind of like the way the movie is set up, where again, like, it's very much kind of character driven, and it's just these little parts of Chris's life that we see him kind of like falling away from or growing into.
Yeah, it's kind of this series, because the big through line, I think, overall with Chris is like all of the ways that he is either like making things up about himself or just kind of going along with the group, like the ways that he is trying to appeal to other people. And the idea of like be true to yourself, or like only, you know, like that's a little bit kind of twee, and that's not quite what's going for here, but it is kind of about like a facet of like, okay, what am I as a person, and what am I interested in doing? You know, like he seems happiest when he's learning how to like make videos, and like, oh look, here's these different ways I can get, you know, better footage or more engaging footage, but he drops it fairly quickly and potentially picks it up again. But, you know, so it's like things that he is actively interested in doing rather than things that he's saying or making up to, oh, well, maybe they'll like me more if I say this or whatever, and that doesn't ever really work out very well.
Yeah, it's like, especially because, you know, he'll be like, oh, Mom, get out of my room, you know, as I'm with the guys. And the guys actually tell him, because he's like, you know, like trying to save face with them, and it completely backfires, because they're like, dude, that you can't talk to your mom like that.
Right.
What the heck? You know? Right, kind of going along in that same way, there's a lot of times in the movie where, like, you know, like there's like a fight, for example, and they try to be like, oh, we're so tough, you know, Didi, not Didi, I'm tired. Cut this part out. It's like, oh, I'm so tough. Chris, you get in here. We're gonna fight. And he gets in. He's like, oh, and then like, he gently slaps the face. And I'm like, whoa, dude, no face punches. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Kind of like dropping all the bravado there, or like at the party, you know, people will be like, oh, what, you know, like, I'd be like, oh, we're so cool. And then somebody was something like, oh, I'm not going to do that. No. And it just all around, you kind of see that thing where people are trying to posture and then kind of immediately fall back.
Yeah.
And that's like part of that age range where you're trying to figure out who you are. You feel like you have to present yourself as somebody, as someone, you know, even like not even necessarily like, oh, I have to be a fake person, but just, oh, I'm going to try this persona out. And then sometimes it doesn't fit. Oftentimes it doesn't fit.
Right. Well, then also he's kind of facing this very extreme sort of version, because there are times when you like, you know, when he's telling a story to like some of the girls they're trying to impress or whatever about like blowing up the squirrel, and it's like one of those where it's like, oh boy, just, you're not reading the room right now, are you? Which, who hasn't done that? Yeah. Versus like, you know, a time when he like physically attacks somebody, which is, you know, a bridge too far. So again, it's kind of like,
oh yeah,
you know, it's such a like potent time and just so much regret.
It's really good at kind of capturing that sense of like, oh my god, I messed up, my life is over. You know, it's like those things where, you know, you mess up and you think like, oh, I am so doomed, I am so done. Because oftentimes it'll be the most trouble you've been in at that point in your life. And then you look back at it as an adult, it's like, oh, that was nothing. You know, it's like when I was in middle school, I got detention after school one day, and I was like, my life is over. It's the end. Everything is going to be horrible forever. And now it's like nobody cares. Nobody did care like a month later. But the movie's really good at kind of instilling that, bringing you back to that place so you could be like, oh my god, Chris is like in such deep shit right now. And you feel that same pit in your stomach and like, oh.
Yeah. And I think it does it in a way that's so wonderfully specific to this time. Like, there's no more suspenseful scenes in the film than when it's just like them on like that like AOL Messenger screen, and he's like, do I put a heart or not after this? And it's just like, oh God, what are you doing? Just like, the like all the politics and social anxieties of like messaging somebody, and like how do you comport yourself with that? How do your friends fuck with you with that and everything?
Yeah, it's like all those little things. And nowadays I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna use XD in my messages and almost every other one, and nobody can stop me. But it's very much a another kind of like go off on a tangent here. But there's this other scene I really liked.
Mm-hmm.
It was it's a point of the movie, when I say it's like about the third of the way through, where we've seen Chris kind of being a little shit to his mom.
Mm-hmm.
His mom's like, I painted this picture.
Oh,
I'm thinking of like sending it to the gallery. What do you think? And Lexi goes, it sucks. And I, like out loud in the theater, I just went, oh my God. But later on, again, this is about a third of the way through, and she's like, hey, do you want to go get some dinner? And they go to McDonald's, and he's kind of being a little goofball at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I feel like we were kind of seeing things almost from her point of view, where it could be like, oh, here he is, this little kid again, who's just goofing around, being silly. And it's kind of like, this is what she sees in him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just like a really... And I don't even know like how to describe like, oh, this is how they did it with these techniques. I don't know how to describe how they did it, but I don't know, it just was a very potent picture that was drawn on the screen, and that carried with me through the rest of the film.
Yeah, I think like the way that they kind of like associate the two of them, it's more of like, this is a time when they're kind of out of the house and all the baggage of that, and they're in this like kind of neutral zone. You can kind of see it from a different angle or whatnot. And like, I really like Joan Chen does a great job with that performance, and it's also kind of nice to know that Josie Packard from Twin Peaks got out of the drawer pull eventually. But like, it does such a good job of like kind of paralleling the two. Like, she's kind of, like you'd mentioned earlier, like she's a misfit in her own right within her sphere. Like, she's not viewed as conventionally successful by her peers by their metric. Like, she has her art that she likes to do, but she got rejected from a amateur competition or whatnot, and she's like living apart from her husband in Taiwan, and she has to kind of do all the apologizing and stuff for her son's conduct when he doesn't exactly kind of behave in a way that is acceptable. And it's not ever really super focusing on it, but you can still get that, and it still really grounds her in this whole kind of superstructure.
Yeah, and especially because she faces pressure from Nai.
Oh my God, oh God. We must not forget Nai.
Who is her mother-in-law, grandmother, with the two kids. And she lives in the house. And, like at times, like she can be kind of like fun and playful and everything, but also she gives mother a very, very hard time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To the point of cruelty, even.
Oh, wow, she's a fucking bitch sometimes.
And she's like, oh, you are totally unfit for this. They are out of control.
Mm-hmm.
If my son was here, he would be ashamed of you. It's like, if my son would keep them in line. And she retorts back, it's like, well, your son's not here, is he?
Mm-hmm. But like at the same time, like she's not just this like evil like caricature. Like, there's still these like beats when you get that she is vulnerable in her own right. Like, there's the scene where Chris comes home and like she's fallen in the backyard, like hanging laundry or something, and just like, well, fuck, like that's a, you know, you feel frail.
Right, like, you know, she feels frail, and especially that comes in a couple scenes after an argument where, yeah, she's always like, you think I'm, you know, it's like you think I'm a liability? You think I'm weighing you down? And then, you know, get to that point, and it's like, oh, you know, like she is not as spry as, you know, she might have thought.
Mm-hmm. Well,
You
just
know,
that sense of helplessness that, you know, you can't do the things that I once did as easily, or there's greater consequences if I fall, for example.
Right, you know, and there's also parts where, you know, she does make positive memories for the family, you know, like Chris records her in the backyard, you know, they have like a funny moment together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this part where Chris's old friends are like, they're kind of roughhousing, and she's like, oh, look out, look, I can dance too. You know, as he's like trying to get his phone back. It's, you know, it's like, you know, she can be playful and everything. She's a three-dimensional character.
Mm-hmm. The movie just has so much empathy for everyone that it's depicting.
She also comes up with the best new if I gave a mouse a cookie kind of story. It's like, because Chris gets in a fight, you know, gets like a black eye, and she tells his mom, is like, if you know, he's getting into fights, they're gonna think you're abusing him. If they think you're abusing him, they'll take him away. And if they take him away, his eye won't get better. If his eye won't get better, then he'll go blind. If he goes blind, then he can't get a good job. If he doesn't get a good job, he can't get a good wife, and then he doesn't get a good wife, he can't have kids, and then our bloodline will come to an end.
I mean, it all tracks. Like, it makes total sense.
It was like the funny, like, this is so funny. This is a catastrophe. It's just, again, a wonderful. It's a wonderful movie, a wonderful experience all around. It's like, it's really fun, but also had me crying in like the last 20 minutes. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it ends with him. He's going to high school, and one of the things that I like is kind of how open-ended it felt, where it's like he doesn't really reconcile with his old friends.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a, you know, kind of acknowledge like, hey, you know, over there, but they don't really hang out anymore.
Yeah, they don't hang out. He was kind of had a really failed attempt at a date with a girl, and like he was super smitten with her, but like you get the sense after that she's not going to be, you know, asking him to Tolo or whatever this year. But
yeah, and you know, very much the end of the movie really stuck with me. Because it ends with him at home, like he's eating dinner, and his mom's just looking at him. And kind of softly looks, and she's just looking at him with so much love in her eyes. And then, I'm gonna start crying again just thinking about it. Oh no.
It's really potent stuff. I really do think that I think the pivotal scene that kind of like crystallizes, if there is a pivotal scene, all of this kind of stuff when it comes to a head is, you know, there's the big kind of confrontation, or there's nothing big in this movie really aside from the emotions, but you know, he punches somebody, and then he ends up like, after the mom goes to make her apologies or whatever, like he ends up running away for the night, and then when he comes back, they kind of have a conversation, which in this kind of movie, I feel like oftentimes it's like the big moment for the parent to like have their like pearls of wisdom or whatever, and it kind of can feel a little bit too like, you know, you got your like perfect screenwriter like 5-pass kind of situation, whereas like this one, like
there's a truck waiting in the driveway.
God damn it.
You're. I'm sorry, I had
you. But like with this one, like Chris is still super selfish and is like, why didn't you, like, you must hate me because you didn't come looking for me. So his like running away was like, you know, an overwhelming emotional thing, but also kind of this like, I want her to follow me. And then she kind of talks about how she like what her life would be like without him, basically. But it's just like it's there's these, you know, they're just both very like honest about everything, and you can really, you know, you get the sense that he's, you know, again, there's a sense of a progression, but he's not like had some kind of magical come to Jesus moment, and she's like very loving and affectionate, but like she frames it in a very like interesting way that doesn't feel like, you know, Hollywood or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, and I kind of liked her reasoning for that. Like she gives them, where it's like, your sister ran away. She was gone for 3 days. I was so worried, sick, but she still came home. And you're not as stubborn as your sister, so I knew you'd be back.
Yeah. Just this kind of like assurance. It's like, look, like you know, when we're like 11, 12, whatever, you know, teenagers, like everything that we experience, we are the first person who've ever done that, and it's never been so dramatic for everyone. But she's like, yeah, okay, it's not true.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, again, like, you know, he's going through all this stuff, and he's going through it at a time when, you know, the way we were socializing was changing. You know, it's like 20 years ago, you and I would have never met. We would have never been friends. You would have never known I existed, except if maybe you came across one of my videos and you thought, oh, that seems stupid.
It's like, who's this idiot?
You know, like, we're able to connect with each other in more ways than ever before, in positive ways, but also in negative ways.
Yeah.
You know, and having your adolescence happen at the dawn of that, when we didn't know yet, like, where this was going, what these things, you know, would do. It's even more turbulent. You know, it's your friend can post about seeing Dark Knight 6 times in the theaters. Rookie numbers, by the way.
Gotta pump those up. I'm gonna see 12 by the end of the week.
You know, but it's like, you know, like you see people kind of, you know, vague posting. You're like, oh, geez, did I make them feel that way?
Well, it's made by someone who clearly like knows that so well, having like lived through it, just because like this is not at all, you know, one of those like, we don't really know how the internet works kind of movies that feel so, even down to like how the movie's edited together and all the sequences of like tabs and shit like that, you know, like it's so true to life that like, you know, it feels in my bones like, oh dear, this is exactly how it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was, yeah, like it took me back to a time when, you know, I was like, oh, things are great, and now I look back, I was like, oh my god, I was such a little monster, and I'm glad that I've grown past that now. I grew past that in high school, and I was like, oh geez, I was so bad 3 years ago, and now I look back at high school, I'm like, oh my god, I was so bad. And then I look at myself like 4 years ago, and I was like, oh my god, I
don't want to think about 2 seconds ago. Disavow knowledge.
I dispose of all my memories every 24 hours. I just don't want to know. I don't want to know.
I just want like memento situation or whatever.
But yeah, any other final thoughts about Dìdi?
It's a really lovely movie. Yeah, Yeah, I think that's kind of. I will say, I don't. The thing that like somehow hit me even more than like the computer shit was the one scene when he has to like go to like the like prep class in the garage. There was like a dude like that like triggered some like lizard brain memory because there was like a guy that ran like that exact thing like like a street down or whatever from me. It's like, oh no, I never had to go. Some of my friends did. It's like, there goes your Saturday. You have to go to Korean school.
I can't imagine what it must have like to go to like PSAT.
Yeah,
actually,
PSAT prep.
I was gonna say yeah, but I just remembered. Oh yeah, I did that too.
I don't even know what I did. I passed the SAT. I don't remember how I did though.
It was because they had it at our school, like provided it, so we could go do it at our school for free. It was really nice, but
yeah, or is it just a network of old dudes?
It's like you practiced for the PSAT, which is already practice SAT.
Yeah, like what
so
the fuck?
Practice for the practice, and then you do the practice, and then you practice for the SAT. And
then you're on to off to like and that's not even talking about any AP classes you had to do.
AP. And I actually did a thing where because I took the AP classes,
Mm-hmm.
I also did academic decathlon, where which was both a club and a class. Like we would go to it at a regular class time, and then we would also do it after school every day, every
Nerd.
week. And then I also took community college classes on the weekends.
So the real fantasy situations, if you're like one of those weirdos that did international baccalaureate, like what the fuck even was that? Is that real?
I actually tried to like look into the program, but it would have been it wasn't at our school. We had to go to a different school in the district, and my mom didn't want to drive the extra like half hour. Which
Fair.
I don't blame her. But yeah. It's a good movie that just and like us, we're talking about it brings you back to those times. It makes you think about how far you've come and how much further we might go.
There we have it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion, Reynard, and thank you all for joining us and listening. If you want to catch more of us, I'm Daniel Goldhorn at YouTube.
I'm Reynard at /cinema on Tumblr.
And we'll catch you all next time. You take care.
Bye.